My daughter's fiancé smashed cake on my face, made a joke, everyone laughed, then I stood up and… Cold, sugary shock of the cake was the first thing I registered, followed by the sound. Not the sound of the wedding music or the clinking of glasses, but the explosive, collective laughter of every person in the room. My daughter, usually so sweet and considerate, was laughing with her fiancé. He stood over me, a smug smile plastered across his face, a smear of red velvet on his jacket. He had called it a joke, and everyone agreed with their boisterous approval. The sweetness of the frosting dripped into my mouth, a sickening contrast to the bitter taste of humiliation. My wife squeezed my hand under the table, but even she couldn't hide her smile. For what felt like an eternity, I sat there, a mockery in a tuxedo. The world seemed to fade into a blur of bright lights and loud, mocking noise. This wasn't a joke. It was a deliberate act of disrespect, a power play by a man who seemed to relish making me the punchline. The laughter finally began to die down, replaced by an uncomfortable silence as people realized I wasn't joining in on the fun. All eyes were on me, waiting to see what I would do. The silence was louder than the laughter. Slowly, deliberately, I wiped the frosting from my eyes and I stood up. I looked him straight in the eyes. He looked him straight in the eyes, his own gaze clear and steady despite the cake dripping from his eyebrows. The smug grin on the young man's face faltered, then disappeared entirely. The rest of the room was now silent, the air thick with anticipation. Slowly, without a word, I reached into the breast pocket of my tuxedo and pulled out a clean, white handkerchief. I began to methodically, almost clinically, wipe the frosting and crumbs from my face. I dabbed at my cheek, my forehead, then meticulously cleaned my glasses. Quiet act was louder than any shouting could have been. Crowd shifted, no longer laughing but staring. My daughter's smile had vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. She finally saw not the comedic spectacle, but the deliberate humiliation. I finished wiping my face and folded the handkerchief neatly, placing it back in my pocket. I still hadn't said a word. The groom-to-be stood motionless, the humor in his joke completely evaporated. It was just us, a father and the man who wanted to marry his daughter. And then I spoke, my voice calm and low so that only a few tables could hear. "You've shown everyone exactly who you are," I said, my eyes still fixed on his. "And you did it before the rings were even on our fingers." The young man's jaw went slack. Confidence that had defined him all evening evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, stunned silence. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His eyes darted from my face, now clean but still carrying the weight of his actions, to my daughter's, who was staring at me with a look of profound sorrow and regret. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned my back on him completely, my attention now solely on my daughter. I walked toward her table, the rustle of my tuxedo the only sound in the dead quiet room. I knelt down beside her chair, ignoring the cake on my trousers, and took her hand in mine. Her hand was trembling. "He doesn't respect me," I said, my voice barely a whisper, meant only for her. "And if he doesn't respect me, he won't respect you. Not for long." Her eyes filled with tears and she squeezed my hand. I gave her a small, sad smile. Then I stood up, looked at my wife, gave her a brief nod, and walked out of the banquet hall without another word, the sound of my shoes on the marble floor echoing behind me. I got into my car, the interior a silent, welcome contrast to the chaos and laughter I had just left behind. I sat there for a long moment, the key still in my hand, staring at the dimly lit road. Cake was still on my jacket, a sticky reminder of the insult. I felt a pang of deep, profound sadness. It wasn't about the cake. It was about the man my daughter was about to marry and the fact that she had laughed along with him. Just as I was about to turn the key, a frantic rapping on the window startled me. I looked up to see my daughter, her face streaked with tears and a look of panicked urgency in her eyes. I unlocked the door and she scrambled into the passenger seat, pulling the door shut behind her. "Dad, what are you doing?" she sobbed, her voice trembling. "How could you just leave?" "It was just a joke." I turned to face her, the dim light from the street lamp casting shadows across her tear-stained face. It wasn't a joke, sweetie, I said, my voice softer now. A joke is funny for everyone involved. What he did was a public humiliation. And what you did was worse. You laughed. She flinched as if I had struck her. I didn't know what to do. I was embarrassed for him, she stammered, looking away. You were embarrassed for him? I asked, my voice rising slightly. You should have been embarrassed for me. Your father. She looked back at me, her eyes pleading. I know, I'm sorry. But you can't just leave. The wedding is still happening. Everyone is asking where you are. What am I supposed to say? I leaned back in the seat and let out a heavy sigh. You can tell them, I said, that the man you're about to marry doesn't respect your family, and a man who doesn't respect your family won't respect you. Dad, you're not making any sense. It was just a little cake, she pleaded, reaching for my arm. I pulled away gently. It's not about the cake, sweetie. It's about what the cake represents. It's about a man who thinks he can do whatever he wants and laugh about it, even at the expense of someone he's supposed to welcome into his family. My voice was calm but firm, a stark contrast to her rising panic. He disrespected me in front of everyone, and you stood by and let it happen. Tears streamed down her face. I love him, Dad. He's not like that. He was just being silly. Was he? I countered, my voice laced with a cold truth she didn't want to hear. Silly is a funny joke. Smashed cake on your father's face and laughing with the crowd is something else entirely. It's a test and not a very good one. He was testing his boundaries, seeing what he could get away with. And you, my sweet girl, gave him a pass. I watched as her face crumpled, the realization dawning on her. She had defended his actions, but now she was forced to see them through my eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken weight of what was truly at stake. It was the moment she had to choose between the man she loved and the man who had always loved her. What do I do? She finally whispered, her voice small and broken. I looked at her, my heart aching. The path ahead for her was murky, and I knew I couldn't walk it for her. I could only show her the truth and hope she had the courage to follow it. That's a question only you can answer, I said, my voice softening. But you have to decide what kind of relationship you want. One built on genuine respect or one where you're just another part of the joke. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine hummed to life, a low rumble that filled the silence. I glanced at her one last time, my face no longer covered in cake but etched with a deep concern for her future. The choice is yours, I said. And whatever you choose, I'll be here. Without another word, I put the car in reverse and slowly drove away, leaving her alone in the dark. With a choice she never expected to have to make on her wedding day, the taillights of my dad's car disappeared around the corner, leaving me in the sudden, deafening silence of the parking lot. The wedding music, a distant, muffled beat, was all that connected me to the celebration I had just fled. His words, sharp and clear, cut through my panic. A joke is funny for everyone involved. I looked down at my dress, at the smear of crimson red where he had hugged me, and the full weight of the moment hit me. He was right. It wasn't just a joke. It was a statement. My heart hammered against my ribs, and the tears that had been falling silently now came in a violent, shuddering sob. I had laughed. I had laughed when he humiliated my father. I thought about the days and weeks leading up to this moment, the little comments he had made, the small acts of disregard that I had dismissed as just his way. A cold, sickening dread settled in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't a game. It was a pattern. I stood there for a long time, the cool night air stinging my tear-soaked cheeks. Choice felt impossible, yet terrifyingly simple. Could I walk back into that room and pretend? Could I marry a man who had such a profound lack of respect for me and my family? The answer, when it came, was a certainty that chilled me to the bone. I took a shaky breath, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and walked back towards the building. I didn't go back through the main entrance. I found a side door, a service entrance that led into the kitchen. I slipped through the swinging doors and emerged back into the main banquet hall. The music was still playing, but the festive mood was shattered. People were clustered in small groups, whispering, their heads turning as they saw me. My fiancé, looking pale and lost, was talking to his best man. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight past my table, past our friends, my eyes fixed on him. He saw me and his face lit up with relief, a frantic, desperate hope that I was coming back to fix this. But I wasn't. I stopped directly in front of him. The music seemed to fade to a buzz. "I can't," I said, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for those around us to hear. "I can't marry you. Not tonight. Not ever." His face, which had been a mask of relief, shattered into confusion, then outrage. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered, his voice loud enough to carry. "It was just a joke. You're going to call off our wedding over a piece of cake." The room, which had been holding its breath, erupted in a flurry of gasps and murmurs. My mother-in-law rushed forward, her face a horrified crimson. "Honey, what is this nonsense? Get a hold of yourself." But I didn't even look at her. My gaze remained locked on his. Tears were gone, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. "It was never about the cake. It was about your character. It was about respect. You had a chance to show me and my family who you are, and you chose to humiliate my father. And I chose to laugh along with everyone else." The admission felt like a heavy weight being lifted from my shoulders. "I'm sorry, but I can't marry a man who doesn't respect the people I love." He took a step toward me, his hand outstretched, but I instinctively backed away. "This is insane. You're being ridiculous. This is my wedding. You can't do this to me," he hissed, his face contorted in a mix of fury and disbelief. "It was our wedding," I corrected, my voice unwavering. "And I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing this for me." With that, I turned and walked away. Not toward the side door, but straight down the middle of the aisle, the same path I had walked just hours earlier. This time, there was no music, no flower girl, no smiling guests. There was only the stunned silence and the echo of my own footsteps. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time all day, I knew exactly who I was. And as I pushed open the heavy oak doors, I felt a sense of profound, liberating peace. The wedding was over, and my real life had just begun. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The sound of the wedding, the whispers and the shocked gasps, was muffled now, a distant ghost of a memory. I was free. I walked across the parking lot, not with a destination in mind, but with the certainty of a new direction. My dad's car was gone, but as I reached the edge of the lot, I saw him standing there, leaning against the hood of his sedan. He was waiting. He didn't say a word as I approached. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. The cake was still a faint smear on his jacket, a silent testament to the night's events. I stopped in front of him, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. "I did it," I whispered, the words a raw, fragile confession. He reached out and gently took me into his arms, holding me tight as I sobbed into his chest. It was a hug that didn't need words. It spoke of pride, of relief, of a father's unwavering love. He was no longer the humiliated joke. He was my hero, and I was his daughter, finally standing on her own. He pulled back and looked at me. "I know," he said, his voice soft. "Let's go home." He opened the passenger door for me. As I got in, I glanced back at the brightly lit banquet hall, at the place where my old life ended. I knew a storm was coming. Phone calls, accusations, questions from family and friends. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I had made my choice. And as my dad drove away, the car silent, but for the hum of the engine, I knew I had chosen the right road. This wasn't the end of a fairy tale. It was the beginning of my own story. That's a powerful ending to the story. The daughter's decision to walk away and her father's quiet support provide a strong sense of resolution and a new beginning.